Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is author slash poet slash all around writer, Soon Jones. We're going to be talking about their new book, These Aren't My Woods Anymore. It's a thin book, but we've got a lot to talk about today. Soon, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Hi, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this because I think you may be the first poet that we've had
Oh,
on the podcast. So I
nice.
have,
Breaking new ground.
yeah, exactly, exactly. There's always something new to talk about, and then writing is always universal. And I've got a lot of questions, but before we get into all of that, as those familiar with the show are aware, we'd like to start things off talking about anything we may have read or watched recently, if we liked it, we didn't like it, or if we're very indifferent or don't want to ever have to see that thing again. I'll go first just to give Soon some time to collect their thoughts. So, three movies that I had the chance to watch, all of them on streaming. First one was a Tom Hanks movie from, I think, either last year or the year before called A Man Called Otto, which is a remake, I want to say, of a Swedish film or possibly a Norwegian film about this cranky old guy who eventually, of course, learns to warm up and accept his fate and also, becomes better ingrained with his neighbors. It's pretty predictable, but it's still a lot of fun, and it's also Tom Hanks, so you can't go wrong with that.
Right.
Second one was Zootopia 2. Didn't see it in theaters, but I enjoyed watching it. I think I may have to watch it again because there's so many sight gags and visual things in the background that are going on that it's so easy to miss them, especially if you're watching it like preferably not on your computer, but at least on your TV, because I'm sure it was probably more visible in the theaters. I enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. And this third movie, just on a total whim, I saw the first one and I was not in a rush to see it, but the opportunity came up to see it. I believe it's on Netflix, and that is Bob Odenkirk in Nobody 2, which is an hour and a half of gun violence silliness. That's probably the best way to put it. Lots of over-the-top cartoonish violence, not for the family, definitely not for small children, but a lot of fun, very silly, and you could tell they probably had fun making it, but way over the top in some areas, and in some ways, it's probably a good thing. But glad I finally got to see it because I knew it was out there. That is it for me. Soon, what about you? Anything good, bad on the reading or watching fronts?
Well, I actually did also recently watch Zootopia 2 and Nobody
Okay.
2. So I won't go back over what you said other than to say like, yeah, I also really like those. I like, Nobody 2. I didn't exactly go into it expecting like, the greatest film of all time. I'm like, I'm here to see Bob Odenkirk do cool stunts, and that's what I got.
Yeah.
Which is what I wanted. But outside of that though, I started watching DTF St. Louis
Okay.
on HBO, which is like kind of a murder mystery between like in like this triangle. David Harbour plays like this kind of really affable kind of guy who's like marriage is not going so great, right? And then there's Linda Cardellini, I think is her name, who plays like his wife, who's
Hmm.
having an affair with his best friend, played by Jason Bateman. I forget the characters' names. Um, but anyways, and so from like the first 5 or 10 minutes that David Harbour's character is dead. And so
Oh,
each
okay.
episode is like is you're getting different viewpoints, like as the wife and the best friend are being interrogated by police, trying to figure out like who's the one who killed him, or is there
Hmm.
some other thing going on? And also kind of like, I don't know. I really think it's interesting because of the way it's like the way their lives are intersecting, and like and there's just I don't know. I love a murder mystery,
Sure,
basically.
sure.
And then recently, film wise, I don't watch films too often, mostly because I'm playing video games. This isn't like I don't watch TV. It's just that's video game time.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but I recently watched Trust, which came out in like 1990. I forget the director's name. It's like Hal something. But Adrienne Shelley is like the main character, who she's a 17-year-old girl who is pregnant by her kind of loser football boyfriend. And she gets kicked out of the house, and like her dad like calls her a slut. She slaps him, and then she storms out, and then he immediately has a heart attack and dies. And so the film is about her, like, I guess, well, I mean, it's a coming of age, really. It's her
Hmm.
kind of transitioning into being a woman, and making the choice to get an abortion. And this part of the film I don't like too much is that she gets involved with this guy who's clearly a lot older than her. Like
Okay.
he's already graduated from college and has like a job like making electronics. And I'm like, what are we doing here? But outside of that, though, I thought that she was just a really good actress, and I don't know, the beginning is like really zany and fun, but
Hmm.
yeah, that was a random watch,
Okay,
but
I'm
really
so
liked it.
maybe Hal Hartley. Does that sound right?
Yes, that
Okay,
sounds
that's
right.
what I thought. Because that
Yes.
sounds like because it's if you said 90s, I was thinking indie director, and I was thinking Hal. It's not Hal Ashby because that's the 70s, and that's like Burt Reynolds. And I was like Hal, and I had to think about it, and never Hal Hartley. So.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean the dialogue in it I think is so good. Like the way it's shot, it feels very like how do I say this? It feels like slice of life, but when your life is bad.
Hmm.
If that makes sense, because she's got troubles with her mother. He's got troubles with his father. There's a lot of like family, like complicated family stuff going on. But yeah, I don't know. Something about like the film literally opens with her like putting on lipstick and going, "Dad, give me $5." And he's like, "I'm not gonna do that. You got kicked out of school." She's like, "What's he talking about? Give me $5." And it's just, I don't know.
It sounds
It's
very
just really,
90s indie film.
yeah, very 90s indie film.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's some great stuff. Okay. So we're talking to Soon Jones, and we're going to be talking about her book, These Aren't My Woods Anymore. So Soon, I'd like to start things off talking to the guest about themselves, kind of their origin story, if you will. Like, how did you get your start? I always like to ask people, were you a voracious reader as a child, or was writing something you came into early, or was it something you kind of developed, not just a knack, but an enjoyment of later in life? I mean, how did Soon Jones become a writer?
So it's kind of two answers. So I started writing fiction pretty early on. I was very much like the stereotypical like reader. I read everything I could get my hands on in the local public library. I like basically exhausted the kids section and moved very quickly to the adult section and just didn't tell anybody. And I remember like what got me into reading was like the Sweet Valley Twin series and also Goosebumps. So two completely different
Those are
dynamics.
definitely two different genres.
Yeah, exactly. I like the slice of life and I like horror. So, um, and then I started writing as like a kid. Didn't really start taking it seriously until I was in my teens, where I would start like writing like novels at home, that um at the time I thought were so good, but
Hmm.
looking back, I was like, well,
Oh
yeah, this
yeah.
was clearly your first writing project. But it wasn't until I was in college that I actually started writing poetry. I
Hmm.
took a poetry class with my professor and advisor, Sarah Burge, who is still my mentor to this day, honestly. And she was like, "Why don't you take my poetry class?" And I was like, "Yeah, why don't I?" And then I took it and I fell in love with it. And ever since then, I haven't looked back,
What
pretty
is it?
much.
What was it about poetry? I mean, I'm curious what your initial thoughts were when she said, "Why don't you take my poetry class?" And then you took it, and then apparently it really clicked for you. So what was it that really just kind of grabbed you?
I think because, well, at first I took her class because I was like, well, I would like to get to know her more if this is going to be my advisor for 4 years. Um, I think what clicked, actually, it's a couple of different things. One of them was that she had brought in like a box of books, like poetry books, and she was like, these were like old books of hers, and she told the class, like, pick one to keep, take it home, and then do a presentation on it. And
Hmm.
I picked this one called Picture Bride by Kathy Song, who is mixed race Chinese and Korean. And I think something about reading that book, I was like, oh, I can write poetry too as an Asian American, and that had just never clicked for me before. It was that and something about like, so up until this point, I had always been writing fiction. I'd always been writing about other people.
Hmm.
Um, but when I started writing poetry, I found that the thing I wanted to write about was myself, which, I feel like is pretty typical. And with it, I found I was able to like deal with my demons, if you
Oh.
will. I was able to like revisit hard moments from my childhood
Hmm.
and be able to put them in a new context. And so it honestly became very cathartic for me to write poetry. So it's to the point now where like I know I have dealt with something if I can write a poem about it.
Hmm.
Like
Okay.
if I can write a poem about it, then that means like or about something hard, I should say, about like a hard moment or something, then that it's a way of for me realizing like through it like this is what I've survived, this is what I've gone through, and now I can kind of put that to bed, in a way. I mean, I don't think you're ever truly over anything in a
Hmm.
sense, but at least to the sense of like, oh, I can like move on with my life. So all that to say, I found that poetry was very healing for me specifically. And I found a lot of, and I think there's a power in being able to take like a traumatic memory and turn it into like art,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
No, no, it totally does. And I was going to say, I have a couple of questions for a little bit later. I mean, a lot of your work, it's a very serious or personal nature. And I guess you say that it was like healing, it was cathartic. Was that, I imagine that wasn't really your intent when you start something. It's just kind of like almost like, as you said, dealing with demons. Like, this is something that's been bothering at me. This is something that's been, nagging at me, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I just think the best way to deal with it is just to write about it. I mean, we've had guests on who've also had their writing as a kind of healing to help get over some kind of personal traumatic experience. You know, some really severe and just like people saying, I've just didn't feel very good. I wasn't very feeling positive about myself, and I just sat down and started writing. A lot of times that was fiction or prose, but they just found
Mhm.
that kind of channeling that creative energy was a way to help them heal. Not again, not totally, but it definitely helped. And it sounds like that's kind of how it was with you in poetry as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's I think there's something about like sorry, I'm trying to like get my thoughts together. I think something about the process of one, in order to be able to write about it, you have to actually sit and think about it.
Hmm.
And you have to have reflection on it. And I think maybe that's kind of a trap that a lot of people fall into where something bad happened. And I was certainly used to be this way. I'm really speaking about myself here. So let me just speak about myself. Up until I started writing poetry, I would just bottle things up
Hmm.
and I would just bury them and I would just be like, nope, we're just going to pretend that never happened and we're just going to go on with my day. But then, the result of that was I was deeply depressed and very angry. Um, so by being able to write poems, I would have to actually sit down and I would have to actually like think through these things and reflect through these things. Like, this is what happened. This is how it affected me. This is how it's affecting me today. This is how and then that led to, this is how I can actually reconcile with it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there's something validating about being able to write down your experience and in a way that, and there's also something very vulnerable in not only writing that down, but offering it to the world,
Hmm.
basically. Being like, I've written down this vulnerable thing and now I'm going to offer it out there. For me, and the hopes that maybe somebody else who has gone through a similar situation
Right.
can go,
Right.
oh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, and a lot of writers, it's because a lot of writing is very personal, and so it takes a lot to be willing to show the world, hey, here's something I wrote, but it's also very reflective about me or something that I experienced. And some writers just can't bring themselves to do that, and so it takes a certain amount of bravery and courage to say, okay, I wrote this thing. It's very personal. It's very it's very dark. It's something that I don't really talk about much, but here I want the world to know about it. And I imagine that's part of that whole catharsis and healing process.
Mhm. Oh yeah, for sure. It's just I don't know. There'd be sometimes I'll write a poem and I'm like, I can't share this yet. I actually
Sure.
we have to put that on the shelf for a couple years. And I'll come back in a couple years and see if I'm ready for it. Um, but yeah, I'm also the kind of person where like I don't like to cry in public.
Hmm.
And so sometimes when I'm reading some of my poems like at a reading, like it'll be a thing where I'm like, oh yeah, I like practice reading this before the reading, so like I'm totally fine to read it out loud in front of a group of people. And then it turns out no, because it's really different reading to yourself in your
Hmm.
like living room versus like, oh, I'm in front of a crowd of people and they're all looking at me and they're all paying attention
And
to
they're
what I'm
hanging on
saying.
every word you're saying.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll read a vulnerable poem, and there was one that happened last year where I just started crying in the middle of it, and I was like, "Sorry, guys, give me a second." And I literally had to turn away from the crowd and face the wall and just be like,
Oh,
"Okay,
wow.
try that again." I forgot what my point was with that. Yeah, vulnerability, I think was the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I
it
also
sneaks up
realized
on you.
we've got to read the about the author,
Oh,
which is again in the back of These Aren't My Woods Anymore. Soon Jones is a Korean lesbian poet and author originating from the rural countryside of the American South. Their work explores the unending cycles of grief, trauma, and finding inner strength in your darkest moments, like we were just talking about. Soon is a 2017 Lambda Literary Fellow and is currently pursuing an MFA in poetry at Oklahoma State University. I have to ask, I mean, do you think part of your upbringing. It was a major contributing factor to being able to channel that creativity, from inside onto the page. I mean, if you said the American South, was it anywhere specific? Was it really rural? Was it like just outside of a big city?
Um, so I say rural South because it was kind of scattered.
Okay.
I was raised in Florida, Kentucky, and with a brief stint in North Carolina.
Okay.
In Kentucky, it was kind of like outside of city limits, kind of
Hmm.
like the early stages of the country, if that makes sense,
Sure.
where there was like a big patch of woods that I would run into and explore all the time. And then when I was living in Florida, it was from like 10 to 18, I think. It was rural. But
Mm.
it was very rural. It was like the middle of nowhere. The closest anything we had was a gas station that took 20 minutes to get to, that
Wow.
had like a little grocery store. And then if you crossed the very busy 4-lane highway across from the gas station was a volunteer fire station, and the bookmobile would come once a week. And that's where I could
Wow.
convince one of my parents to take me to the bookmobile so I could get some books. And I think the nearest city was like Atmore, and that was like you're looking at least a 30 to 40-minute drive on like, roads where the speed limit is like 55. Everything was really far away.
Wow, that is amazing. I did want to actually, because we also did want to talk about your book, These Aren't My Woods Anymore. So I like to ask the guest for screenwriting, it's like the elevator pitch, but for more authors, and I guess for poets, it's the cocktail party pitch. If you're mingling and you're socializing and say, "Oh, soon, tell me about your new book. These aren't my woods anymore," and they say, "What's it about?" And you say,
I would say it's a book about a childhood in danger, in different kinds of danger, physical danger, religious danger, and domestic danger in the home, although that one is maybe not touched on so much.
hmm
I would say it's about the difficulty of growing up queer in a very anti-queer, like violently anti-queer culture.
hmm
Yeah.
Okay, that's totally
I'm trying to think like, yeah, I think that's about it.
no, that
I'm
that's
not
per
good at elevator pitches. I
that's
apologize.
okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. Um, what was the inspiration for, I guess, not just a lot of the works, as you said, a lot of the works are based on things that you experienced growing up. But what was the inspiration for wanting to put it all together in a collection? I think I read somewhere like you had all your poems like written out and you put all the papers on the floor and you said this one, this one, this one, this one, and you just kind of like said, these are the ones that I want to put in this book.
Yes. Yeah, so basically it was like I said, I had all my poems on the floor and I realized I had a lot of different themes going in a lot of different directions. And then I realized I had a bunch of solid poems that were strictly about like my childhood. And,
Mm.
a couple of these poems are even like a little bit into my early 20s, but I saw that as more of like the ending
Hmm.
of the childhood hit section. And um child to screwed up adult who is like still trying to deal with these kinds of things. Um and then from there, the absolutely agonizing part, which is trying to arrange the poems
Oh,
in a certain order that makes sense. And that part, oh, that part's so hard.
yeah,
That part,
I was going to say, so even like the cover, I'm guessing that's you as a child
yes, that's
and a
me.
dog.
That's
I think we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but like the effect of your upbringing on your writing. So I mean, as you guys said, you didn't start out immediately with poetry. It was all about more prose and fiction. And what kind of influence did that have on your writing? I mean, like these all these things that you were experiencing growing up. Were you looking at writing as more of an escape, or just kind of like I'm so creative and there's nothing in this place that can help me, help me nurture that. I just have to take it upon myself to do that. I mean, what was the effect of like growing up where you did? How did that affect your writing, not really your writing ability, but your tendency to write?
I think it's that it was, well, on the first place, it was certainly an escape.
Hmm.
You know, I had mm, I'm not trying to harp on it. I don't want to turn this into like a pity party, but like I
Mm.
had a very most days were very difficult for me in my childhood, and usually hiding somewhere and writing was one of the few times I could like escape everything that was going on around me.
Hmm.
And so instead of things happening to me, now things are happening to the characters. But the characters, unlike me at that time, have the autonomy to change their situation. And I think that was a large part of what drew me to writing is that I could write characters who also had hard childhoods, but they had the tools to better their situation,
Mm.
while I felt at the time that I did not. And it was that, and it was also, there's something about being in the woods. I spent a lot of my childhood in the woods. I genuinely think there's something about being in the woods that just naturally brought out creative
Mm.
energy. Where there's like no distractions, because I was often by myself, which looking back, I shouldn't have been by myself because, like an 8-year-old in the middle of the woods by themselves is like not good. Actually, that was one of those things that took until my 30s to be like, now wait a minute. Um, but being out in the woods by myself, where it's just like, I don't know, I've always just been very influenced, inspired by nature. Just
Hmm.
something about it. Just something about just being out in the woods. Um, I think between that and the escapism, and also, well, actually, now that I think about it, it was also part of it was spite, and
Mm.
defiance. My stepmother was very let's say she would give Cinderella's stepmother a run for her money,
Okay.
to put it lightly. And if she ever found any of my writing, she would say stuff like, "This is proof you're demon possessed and you're writing terrible things." It's like I'm just writing little like fantasy adventure stories.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, like not even that, but because it was fantasy and had
Mm.
magic, therefore it's witchcraft or something, like
Oh,
that kind of
got it.
thinking.
Got it.
But it was really, I don't think she even really believed that kind of stuff. I honestly think it was just, she was always trying to squash down any kind of creative output I had, which motivated me to
Mm.
keep doing it. I just did it in secret. So, I wish I had like some big, brave, like, I found the power within myself kind of a thing to say, but really a lot of it was spite. I kept going out of spite to be like, no, I'm not gonna let you end this for me. I'm just gonna keep going.
Okay, so there was no like you grab the sword and defeat the dragon. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, take this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well that is great. So what exactly would you say is your process for writing a poem? I mean, a lot of them are based on, your personal experience, and do you just kind of think, okay, what is the best way for me to, I guess, not translate, transcribe this from how I'm feeling to words on a page? Do you do a couple of drafts? Do you just start writing and just kind of let your hand take over and then kind of like your brain takes a back seat? Just kind of like, I'm just gonna see what happens as I write this, or do you like put a lot of thought into it?
It's kind of a blend of everything.
Mm.
Some of my best poems came from like 2 in the morning when I just got a random line in my head and I was like, I'm just gonna write down this line. And then the next line comes and the next line comes and then all of a sudden I've got a whole poem and I'm like, oh, that's like really good. I should probably work on that. I'm gonna go to bed now and work on that. But sometimes it comes from like, okay, I'm going to write about a specific thing.
Mm.
So I'm really gonna sit and reflect and think and try out a bunch of different kind of lines or stanzas or something and see
Hmm.
how that feels. Um, and then sometimes, honestly, I'm just like on a walk and a poem will pop into my head. The poem Horse Girl, that was a walk poem. The
Mm.
first draft of that was on my phone as I was like walking. I was just like tap 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 tap. Um, so yeah, so it's a little bit of everything, I guess. Sometimes they just come to me. Sometimes I have to really sit and think for like a long time.
Do you spend a lot of time like after you write, I guess we'd call it like the first draft? Do you
Mhm.
spend a lot of time going back, tweaking it, kind of like fine tuning it, or is it a lot of times you write it and just like, yeah, if I change, this word and like add a comma and it's all set? Or is it again, is it a blend of everything?
It's usually more like I'll write a poem and then after the first draft, I need to let it sit. So
Okay.
I'll be like, okay, I wrote that poem. I'll come back to it in like a week.
Hmm.
And then I'll come back into it in like a week with fresh eyes, and then I'll go, okay. what do I need to change? Sometimes it'll be a radical change. Sometimes I'll end up cutting a poem in half and being like,
Hmm.
I don't actually need the second half at all. Sometimes it's just, oh, I just need to move the stanza over here. I mean, I'm always fiddling with like the words and the commas. And like actually, with poetry, that takes so long. Like, because I spend so much time sometimes agonizing over a single word that
Hmm.
probably nobody else is gonna care about, that it used to be this other word. But I will spend so much time being like, no, it needs to have the exact nuance that I'm looking for, and it makes me feel like a crazy person sometimes.
Spoken like a
Um,
true writer.
it's like no one's gonna care if there's a comma here or no comma, but I'm like, but it'll make a pause, and then at the pause, well, and it's just, and sometimes I just need to relax.
Sure. A lot, as we said, a lot of your poems are of a very serious and personal nature.
Mhm.
Do you ever feel compelled or just kind of like, I need something to, let off steam to relieve this pressure? Do you ever like feel like writing something extremely silly or just, like a silly poem, like, Ode to a Big Toe, that just off the top of my head, just something very lighthearted in nature, or is this not how you are?
Oh no, I definitely write like silly random poems. But then those usually aren't the ones that get picked up
Oh, okay.
because like
They don't
because it's like
sell.
where's the conflict? Yeah, exactly. They don't sell. I have a whole bunch of them. They're just on my hard drive, but but if there's like no conflict, then it's I don't know. I wrote one about crickets. I don't quite remember it. I was just listening to some crickets. I'm like, I'm gonna write a poem about crickets outside my window.
Okay.
You know?
So again, kind of like turning back to the more serious stuff. Uh, After you've written a poem, do you ever get the feeling, or maybe while you're writing it, that do you ever feel like this is too much, or I have to dial things back, or this isn't enough. I have to push even further. I have to like really, throw the emotion at the reader. I mean, is that something you wrestle with when you're writing a poem, or do you kind of like you just kind of like get it out of your system and then think, okay, how can I do I need to change this? If so, how do I want to change it? Do I want to make it more intense? Do I want to dial things back?
I think usually it's realizing that I need to make things more intense
Hmm.
because I have a tendency to really kind of like downplay things. And then I have to be like, no, I need to actually put out what is actually going on and what I'm actually going through. And also, to be honest, sometimes I cheat and I'm like, I'm just gonna leave it to like the in between the lines kind of a thing,
Hmm.
which is a little bit of a cheat. So yeah, mostly like, well, no, I take that back. There are times where I've written a poem and I am like, this feels too intense. And that's usually a poem that gets shelved for a little bit until I
Hmm.
can come back and deal with it. Because usually when I think it's too intense, it's because it's too intense for me. And
Okay.
I'm like, oh, I'm actually not quite ready to face this in a way
Hmm.
that I can turn into a poem and put it out there.
And
Um,
do you eventually return to that and think, okay, I that you become more accepting of it for yourself, and you think, okay, now I'm ready to unleash it on the reading public. Is that something that you really have a lot of struggle with, or just something like, okay, I'm ready to, I've accepted how this poem is and what it's saying. Okay, now I'm ready to show everybody else.
Yeah, I would say usually like when I'm ready to come back to it, that's when I'm like, okay, I can actually look at it. Now I can actually like perceive it, figure out what I need to like strengthen the weaknesses and stuff
Hmm.
and be able to put it out there. But also a lot of times, probably half the time, will realize that I have actually outgrown the poem.
Oh.
Um and realize like, oh, I've actually tackled this same thing in a different poem and that should just be the new poem. And then this one can just stay a scrap. So
Do you hold on to, I guess, snippets or remnants of previous work that maybe you can incorporate the language into something else? I mean, as a writer, I hold on to so many things that I've written before and I've cut
Mhm.
out of a script or an outline. Think, okay, I can't use it for this story, but I can hold on to it for this other story, which is totally different, but the scenario still works in that context. Is there something similar for you when you're working on poems?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have like poems from like 10 years ago that will never be published, but I hold on to them. I hold on to snippets. Like if I'm making radical changes to a poem, I'll save the old version
Hmm.
in case I ever want to look at it later, because you never know when like a line from an old poem can become the seed for a new one. And I mean, as like writing fiction, right? I also do that as well. I have like a just so much like old snippets and stuff that I save because I'm like, okay, this doesn't work in this story, but it might be its own story somewhere else. Um, because also too, I think it's well, okay. So when I was a kid, I had this box where I put because I would just write by hand on a notebook,
Hmm.
and I would put all of my writings in that box. And then one day, when I was like probably like 13 or something, I was reading back at some of my older stuff, and I got very embarrassed and very ashamed, and I threw away a bunch of stuff.
Was it about the content or how it made you feel?
Just the writing ability. I was
It was
just
just
like,
like this is written by a very bad teenage
yeah,
poet.
exactly, exactly, exactly. I was like, this is terrible writing. And so I got rid of a bunch of stuff, and I have regretted it ever since,
Wow.
because I'm like, I could look at the stuff I wrote at 8 now and find value at it, but at 13, it was just cringe. So now I'm like, even if I think it's cringe, I save everything. I have like an external hard drive where I back everything up.
Okay.
Um, and I think I have a folder called like the archive.
I was gonna say you have
It's
one
just
box, really good stuff, the other box, questionable.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And because I think also too, even if it's something that you don't end up using, I have found like, especially with like imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
I found that it's useful to be able to go and look back at stuff I wrote that was really bad, like, and is
Hmm.
really cringe, and be able to be like, I'm doing a lot better now.
Yeah, I was going to
You know what?
ask. I was going to ask, have you ever gone back and read something you wrote like maybe more than a year ago or a couple of years ago, and you think, "Wow, this is really good," and like almost like I can't believe I wrote this.
Actually, yeah, that happened recently. There was a poem I'd written like a few years ago, and I was like, I don't know what it was a poem about my mom and a trip we had taken in Korea. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this poem. This is crap. So I threw it in the archive. And then I'm working on my thesis for my university right now. So I was like, you know what? Let me go through the archive and see if there's anything I can transform. And I found that poem, and I was like, wait. Actually, this is a good poem. And so I took it and I did a lot of revisions in it, and I put it in like parts and stuff. And so now that's going to be part of the thesis. But yeah, so sometimes sometimes it helps you get a degree.
That's fantastic. Would you say is there any poem in particular of yours that has got, the biggest or the strongest reaction, whether positive or negative? And also, have there been poems that maybe you've done like at a live reading and you got a reaction that you were not expecting?
Um, Probably. So this one's not in the book, but it is online. It's called This Is How the Body Knows. It was published in the Good Life Review a few years back. And it was a poem I had written about I had like I was like at the time recovering from breast cancer. And
Hmm.
so I had written a poem kind of like how I had pieced together that I had breast cancer. And that one seemed to do really well, and I got like my first pieces of fan mail from that, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'm just a random person. As far as like what's in the book though, is that hang on, let me look at the let me
And the
look at my
book
Google
again, once again,
Docs.
these aren't my woods anymore,
Yeah.
and we are talking to Soon Jones.
Horse Girl is always a hit at a live reading. People
Okay.
love Horse Girl. And that's usually like the one that people be like, I love that poem, Horse Girl, or like I'll get like a big reaction. Like people really like that one, which honestly I like too, because I kind of feel like that's a poem that's like me in a nutshell, if that makes sense.
I was going to say, do people hear you like read the title and then you read the poem and they say that is not what I thought the poem was going to be about?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of it, is
Mm.
because you think it's gonna be about horses. It's not about horses. It's not really about horses.
Okay, you also mentioned that you started out writing prose and you still occasionally work on it. Is it challenging for you to go between the two? Like maybe, Monday through Wednesday I'm working on poems and then, Thursday is designated, a prose or fiction day. Is it tough for you to transition between the two, or are you just kind of like, okay, well, I was working on poems yesterday and today it's back to he said, she said, and action, noun, verb, that sort of thing.
Right. It honestly is very difficult for me. I see it as like two different muscles,
Hmm.
honestly. There's like the poetry muscle and like the fiction muscle. And although they both work, like your writing ability, it's no, I have to like I call it poetry mode and fiction mode. Like,
Sure.
okay, I gotta focus and shift into poetry mode. Okay, now I gotta focus and shift into fiction mode. So it's go honestly, like if I wrote a poem the day before, it's gonna be really difficult for me to write fiction the next day.
Hmm.
It's the same as vice versa. I have to, this is gonna sound like The Secret or something. I have to set my intentions and be like, okay, no, think prose, 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 prose. Usually what I'll do to switch is I'll like let me pick up a book and
Hmm.
read a couple of chapters out of a book, or if I'm wanting to switch into poetry mode, I'll be like, let me read some poems. And that will help me like, okay, because the way you use language is just so different.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm trying to I like the idea of writing, and I know poets have done this, and I commend them for it because it sounds like a nightmare to me of like writing a novel like you would write a poem. I'm just like, I don't think I could keep up that energy.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. I was going to ask, have you ever had maybe a prose work inspired by one of your poems, or opposite, like a poem inspired by something you've written in prose?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, okay. I don't think I've had like a poem that inspired a story or a story that inspired a poem, but I have cheated and like
Okay.
slipped a line from a poem in a story and then slipped a line from a story in a poem where like the subjects are completely unrelated, but I was like,
Hmm.
I already said this pretty good over here.
That's
I'm
we
just
call
gonna
we
sneak
call that
this in.
creativity.
Yeah. So I,
Uh,
I have I have done that.
okay, that's yeah, it's your work. It's not like you're plagiarizing from yourself.
Right.
Okay, so this collection, again, as we've been saying, is these aren't my woods anymore. So, what are some other collections of poems that you have? And again, you said like this one is a lot of your experiences growing up and like from childhood to young adulthood. Do the other collections reflect like maybe a different aspect of your life? I mean, something more personal or more like this is what happened. This other collection is after I moved out of the house and started going to school type of thing.
So this is my only published collection right
Hmm.
now.
Okay.
I'm currently working on my thesis, which will hopefully be the next collection. Tentatively, should I say the title? I don't know if I should say the title. Maybe I won't. I don't
If you
know.
don't want to, it's totally fine.
I, I have no idea if that's like, I'm like, would I be shooting myself in the foot if I did that? I don't know. Well, hold off.
An Untitled
Because
Soon Jones
also
project.
Untitled Soon Jones Project. And that one is similar in that I was like, this is kind of like a portion of my life. That one still does include some stuff from like my childhood, but it's mostly concerned about um it's mostly concerned about like my experiences with lesbianism, like both as a child and as a teen and an adult.
Hmm.
And also like the very questionable dating choices I've had. And just kind of like going through that kind of world. Yeah, so I would say the second book is much more about queerness
Okay,
specifically. Kind of
got it.
like still has some childhood stuff. It's about queerness and also about cancer because I feel like these things are kind of like connected in a weird
Hmm.
way because it really changed how I viewed my body.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things that I was very self-conscious about, like re-entering the dating world.
Hmm.
Um, which right now is going great. I'm just gonna so nobody don't be
So
worried
so
for
for,
me
for
anybody.
those who are listening on Spotify, she just gave a double thumbs up for that one.
Yeah, so don't worry about me. Everything's going good.
Okay.
Despite my sad poems, I promise I'm happy.
Well, you got the video games as well.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
Again, so Soon Jones in the book is These Aren't My Woods Anymore. What advice would you give for people who are not just writers, but you know, I guess people who think like I like to write poetry. what can I do about it? Is there a way I can improve? What if I think, my stuff is good or people really seem to like it? I want to try and not get it published, but I want to get it out there. I mean, what advice can you have? What advice would you give for people?
I would say, of course, the thing that probably everybody says is read a lot. Read a lot of poetry from a lot of different people, and even read some prose. Read some like very lyrically charged prose if you can. Just read anything you can get your hands on, whether you like it or not. Because even the things that you don't like and you think are terrible, those are still going to teach you something.
Hmm.
Like for example, what not to do. But when you read, don't just read and be like, well, that was a good poem, but read and be like, what about this strikes you? What about this feels good to you? Is it the words themselves? Is it the visual language on the page? The other advice I would have is really try to find somebody else you can workshop with.
Hmm.
Try to find another poet, another writer that you can trust. If you can get a group, that's even better. Um, like maybe if there's like local book clubs in your area or like bookstores in your area, if there's any kind of like, maybe even just meetup.com, like if there's any kind of writing community in your area, or you can also find them online. I found a terrific writers group for fiction online back when I was still on Twitter that I'm still a part of, and that's improved my fiction by leaps and bounds. And the same goes for poetry because you can look at it all day long, you can study your own work all day long, but sometimes you need another reader
Hmm.
to be able to come and look at it and point out something that you've missed. And sometimes it's just as simple as like you thought that what you wrote made sense, but somebody will come along and be like, this part confuses me. And then that's a sign to be like, okay, let me go back and see if there's another way I can word it to make it clear what I'm trying to get across. But that being said, also be careful because um, sometimes people so you are going to come across people who are not going to be able to understand your work, and that's not a you problem. That's not even necessarily a them problem. It's just sometimes you're just not compatible in that way.
Hmm.
So try to find writer friends. I would say that's a big one. Don't do this alone.
Hmm.
There's no reason to do it alone. I guarantee you can find somebody that you can be a writer friend with.
Yeah, as we've said many times, writing in itself is a solitary activity, but it definitely helps to have a community that you
It
can go to
does.
for support that they can support you and you can in turn help support them as well.
Oh, actually, I have another piece of advice.
Oh yeah,
Listen,
sure.
listen to hip hop. I'm so serious. Listen to hip hop, listen to rap, and really pay attention to the lyrics because, I mean, sure, like, not saying that like other kinds of music don't do this as well, but in my experience, a lot of rap lyrics really play with words, do a lot of wordplay that I feel like other more conventional songs don't.
Hmm.
And also the way that like a rap song can have like a million references, hidden in there. But if you get the references, that kind of paints the song in a new light. And also rap music is really good at slant rhymes. Like they're always doing a slant rhyme at the end, right? Taking two words that shouldn't rhyme, but making it rhyme. You know what I mean? So that's my other piece of advice is that sometimes like the lyrics in there can really like if you pay attention, you're like, oh, that's like pay attention to like what's because a lot of it has to be clever.
Hmm.
Like I feel like to be like a successful rap song, it has to be clever. And I think that also really helps.
Okay. Well, again, we've been talking today with Soon Jones and her collection of poems. These aren't my woods anymore. Available now. Soon, this has been a fascinating discussion. Again, first poet we've had on the show. Where could people find out more about you, and if they wanted to get a copy of These Aren't My Woods Anymore?
So you can find me at my website, soonjones.com, SOONJONES, or you can find me on Instagram at the Soon Jones. If you want to find a copy of the book, you can find that with my publisher, Poetos Press. I believe it's poetos.com or poetospress.com. Oh no, I didn't think that
Well,
one
it's
through.
I think if you I
Poetos.com,
think it's on the back.
poetos.com.
If you just put in
Yes,
Poetos,
yes.
Poetose, I'm sure they'll come up.
Yeah, and that's not poet toes like on your feet, but Poetose, poet and prose put together.
Got it. Got it. All right. Well, again, Soon Jones and their book, These Aren't My Woods Anymore. Thank you so much for being here today. This was a great, great conversation.
Yes, and thank you for having me. I had a blast.
Oh, I'm really glad. And viewers and listeners, if you had a blast and enjoyed today's show, please hit like, feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. For social media, you got my screenwriting blog, Maximum Z. That's at maximumz.blog. This show is on Twitter and Blue Sky at podcast CWL. For my personal stuff, it's at Pez Screenwriting on Blue Sky and on Instagram. And I have my three Go Ahead and Ask books, the ones about screenwriting and pie. Those are on Amazon. Like I said, that's soon. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.